Move up a little bit. All right, hey guys, Anthony with Austin Historical Weapons Guild here with Joshua. Again, we are in Vigilante, our new home during the pandemic. Today we're going to talk about Lignitzer, Sword and Buckler, his rule number 2, or item number 2, or however he describes them. So again, we talked a little bit last week about distance for this. We kind of demonstrated that this feels like it works best at the same distance. 133 works from, we're starting about 2 cuts, 2 steps away from each other before we're able to hit each other. So we're going to be applying that same idea again this week. The other thing I'm looking at today is kind of his intention and his timing with these actions. Most specifically of whether or not, despite reading like he's doing a reaction, trying to look at this as if he's taking the vor, if he's going first and control and seizing the fight. So this section is from the underhow, from the rising cut. He doesn't give us an angle. It kind of implies it doesn't matter because he says you can do it from both sides. So we'll look at that as well and how that plays out. And my opponent, Joshua, will be cutting in from his right shoulder. So if we start, Joshua's going to be up, cutting from the right shoulder. And again, just to prove verify distance before we begin, starting 2 steps away. So 1 back, 2 starting here. We have no guidance of foot forwards or whatever. And again, for Sword and Buckler, at least from 1 through 3, has shown that it really doesn't matter that much, because unlike with Longsword, where you need to be stepping, keeping everything engaged, Sword and Buckler, you're usually working from the hips, from the shoulders, and footedness doesn't seem to matter. So demonstrating it 2 ways. First will be if I'm in the vor, if I'm going first, if I'm throwing a rising cut, which then makes him react with a cut from his right side towards me. So cutting, stepping in. From here, I'm turning to meet his cut into the 2 shield position, which again, we don't have a whole lot of information on. This looks and feels a lot like the shoots in we see in Sword and Buckler in 133. But it's kind of this idea that I want to get both of my weapons out and across, whether it's one or the other. Top doesn't really matter. I intuitively am going to like having the buckler up high, keeping the hand safe, stopping him from sliding down and taking things. Sure, this is fine, but I don't really have the same mobility I have if my buckler is really pressed up. So again, I'm stepping in, baiting him to move. From here, as I set him aside, I turn away from everything, cutting through the face. So again, just that much. I'm throwing my rising cut. He goes to meet it. I turn, I take my cut from being center focused to just dealing with his weapon and putting it away. From here, this opens up his side, lets me to step across, separating my weapons, kind of implying that I want to try to find his sword if I can, push it away, keep it away as I walk through, cutting across his jaw. So the option that he gives us is that if he sees us coming and raises up his buckler, and this is where that difference comes out, that's really important. So again, throwing my rising cut, I catch, bring it aside. He sees that coming. He gives me this opening, so I'm going to step through and cut to the left leg as I walk out. I like this interpretation better, this option better than the cut to leg being a secondary option from him pairing my attack. So if I'm here, again, I'm cutting up, I turn against, he raises high. If I've cut into this, yes, I can start doing this, but you can already see Joshua has that ability to track me. Even though I start pulling this away, he can start moving, disengaging his sword the same way. And it just gives him too much time, too much motion. And sure, we can argue that maybe if I move faster, if I move better, I throw this cut, I turn out, he parries, maybe I can just be running through this way. But this doesn't feel like a good strike. I still don't have as much control of the weapon, and really I'm just giving him too much time. So instead of that, if we're able to really deflect and open up this line, as he goes to parry this kind of obvious threatening attack, I can drop through between, take the leg as I leave, instead of doing it in 2 actions. This really comes into play in the difference of if I just treat this as a knock reaction, right? So if I'm just sitting low and I wait for him to step in and attack, Now as I step in, I still have this turn strike, kind of, right? It is a little bit easier for him to start moving and covering. But I still have that turn strike to come through, but he no longer has a need to just separate his weapons the same way, right? So if he goes to parry, he's more prone to lifting both things up together. I don't have nearly as much control, and that definitely takes away that angle shot down to that leg. So again, from the knock, the attacks, I raise up into this two-weapon thing. I have this, and I really have a hard time getting around that left leg. I haven't been able to close that distance nicely. To strike it safely, strike it easily. So it really starts to show up that this needs to be a vor action, right? This works much better, far more efficiently if I can throw a rising cut to start, make him react, and then set it away. Right, then I go from my rising cut into my two shields. And you can start thinking of this no longer as a, oh, I moved to this position as he cuts, to do this, and try to move from there. But it really becomes, it's a bind position. So now I've cut to a bind. When I bind, I open everything up, pressing wide with both weapons to strike high, to pull them up to get that low strike, things like that. The other thing I promised to talk about, tying in this briefly, which we didn't rehearse or practice, so this should be fun, is looking at it from the other side. So we'll look at this two ways real quick, kind of see which works better, how this kind of works. But I'm going to start on my left, and I'm going to drive him to the right. And we'll see if he can cut from his right side still, because he says it works the same to both sides, or if I can only do this if I bait him off to the left with that motion. So first, starting from the left, again, I'll be going first, setting aside, controlling from there. So I throw my rising cut, he makes that bind. I'm going to push wide open, that same kind of shoots in almost, if you know, the 133. And this gives me this nice opening there the same way, right? If he does raise up to attack it, I'm going to have a hard time hitting that leg, but I'm definitely going to take that arm without a problem. It also lets me walk away and get away from him safely, like the text seems to indicate. So again, working if we're on the same side, after that rising cut, I push it aside, which nicely sets everything away. If I really start stepping through, try that again. So if I'm rising cut, if I really start stepping through, I can get this nicely. And he's actually crossed himself up with that, which can make it even harder for him to do something useful. From here, though, if he sees that opening coming, right, I can drive through with the front leg, trapping the sword into myself, kind of. So not the greatest, not the cleanest. I definitely like, even if I'm from the same side, kind of walking past. So again, we're brushing right shoulder to right shoulder. So I cut, I make him open. I can take that high opening. If he covers it, I can try to strike low. I can strike the hand. I have a lot of easy options to walk past and walk away. If he is starting from the opposite side, if he's starting from his left, start from the shoulder, the high shoulder. Same thing, I'm gonna cut high. Right here, he's gonna have a terrible time, which is a problem with third ward, right? Getting that up at all to cover that. But otherwise, it does feel like the exact same setup, so it doesn't seem to matter, doesn't seem to influence one or the other if he's starting left or right from the left side. The only difference is that leg is gonna be a harder target, but that arm, his sword arm, is gonna open up really nicely. So that's our hot take, quick take on Lignitzer number 2. If there are Lignitzer veterans out there, please feel free to comment, critique, analyze, yell, whatever makes you happiest. I'd love to hear some feedback on these as we're going through them. Otherwise, always reach us on Facebook, historicalweaponsguild.com, any of those amazing places. I'll be back Wednesday night, hopefully with a fun pre-recorded video if video editing works well, and then on again on Friday with some longsword. Have a good night, guys. Thank you.